reaction to an interview that the co-CEO of Waymo gave on the No Priors podcast. It's about 8 months old, so forgive me for doing something that might be outdated by now. But I think the things I want to say here are really general stuff, so it doesn't really matter on the current situation, whether it's with Waymo, whether it's with competitors. And my point here is, I think it's a very good interview. Shout out to No Priors, which is also actually on the list of tech podcasts that I recommend. So there's Weights and Biases, No Priors, the Trimble podcast by Sam Charrington, and of course Software Engineering Daily, the OG. But back to No Priors. So they interviewed the co-CEO of Waymo, and I feel like in this interview you see some very important patterns that transpire in the technology industry, particularly when it comes to real-world AI. I think first, maybe a human thing, like they're not really talking about the 800-pound gorilla, which is Tesla, and the ability to deliver a service at much lower cost than what Waymo has. So that's not being discussed, which I think it's not on the No Priors people. I mean, it's not their job. They're not journalists. I mean, they're not whatever. I mean, they're tech people, they're venture capitalists. They have to keep a good relationship with Google and things like that. So I'm not necessarily chastising them for that. I think it just reflects more in how Silicon Valley works, right? To get access to these people who have power, you kind of have to almost, it's like being summoned to the court, and you can't tell the king in simple words what's going on, right? It feels a bit like that. So that's just one observation. Now, they talk about Waymo as a service and the technology, and I think the most important thing that comes across here is what's called technical debt. Waymo started, and actually that comes across in the interview, the CEO, he started in the mid-2000s. He was part of the DARPA Challenge crowd. He worked in Sebastian Thrun's lab. And as much as these people have, I think, done good work and everything, they're a good example of two things. One is that when the government decides to do something, it's often the wrong time, and therefore it's not going to succeed. Whether that is the moon landing, whether that is the self-driving car challenge of DARPA, the government needed robots to drive around in the desert to fight, Al-Qaeda and Iraq and all that. And it just wasn't ready. The technology wasn't ready. In particular, what wasn't there was what we call AI today, with the proliferation of neural nets, through AlexNet and the ImageNet competition, and then later on transformers. Those are things that today have a massive impact on the ability to deliver these technologies. And I think the most important aspect of this is the sensor technology, because in order to move around, you have to see. Now, what Waymo is doing is actually betting on more than just vision. They have sensor fusion. And I've actually done a course with Sebastian Thrun about this. So sensor fusion is a core of the technology. Maybe today they've changed a bit, but you see, like that wasn't necessary after 2012. You could bet on computer vision as a solution to the self-driving car problem, which is what Tesla did. So this technical debt is what Waymo is still carrying on. The next big breakthrough was the bitter lesson by Dick Sutton and David Silver and this crowd, which manifested itself in particular in AlphaGo Zero, but then later on in what's called end-to-end training. So there was this idea before AlphaGo Zero that you need a modular approach towards AI, task-driven, special, problems need special algorithms, all that kind of stuff. That's still how Waymo works today. Waymo is a Frankenstein AI. And what Sutton says is, forget all this. You don't need heuristics. You don't need a modular approach. The more general and the larger, more general and more end-to-end you are, the more intelligence you will get. This has been later on also confirmed with the Platonic representation of intelligence, a paper that we discussed fairly recently, links in the show notes. And then I think it also comes across in, for example, the observation that when you train models in a general way at large-scale data, they get better at specific tasks and outperform specifically trained models, whether that is translation models, poetry models, mathematics models, or in the robotics world, if you have a self-driving car that also, let's say, if we have a humanoid robot that is trained in the same model like a self-driving car, both of them will be better at their own functions than specifically trained models. So this general representation of intelligence is I think one of the biggest breakthroughs in the AI research as a whole, and actually really brings up very interesting philosophical questions and answers towards what is intelligence, what actually, how do we progress as a human race? How do we get better at things? And the answer is the best way to progress is to try to be as wide and general as possible with the best possible data that we can get to train for specific tasks. So concretely, that means that the best way to have self-driving car technology on the roads is to scale up the data collection and build a pipeline of data collection and data interpretation and then training that can take advantage of a large general model. And that's kind of what Tesla's doing. That's also what Tesla is planning to do with Optimus. So both of these approaches are, in our opinion, exactly the right way to go, versus the Frankenstein model of Waymo is just the wrong approach. And it's not that these people are not good at it or anything like that. I would not dare to say that. I think the Waymo people are exceptional. I think it's just typical sunk cost fallacy, technical, that all of these human aspects of management. So what is the sunk cost fallacy? It is that, well, we've already invested so much in this technology. Let's keep working on it. Let's not give up on it. Well, while the best way to do it would be to scrap it and start from scratch. So that's something that only some of the most successful entrepreneurs can do. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, people like that, they can do that. That's why they create trillion-dollar companies. Then you have the, I guess, the anticipation of how to build intelligence over a long period of time. So basically, you have the ability to iterate across several technological iterations. So what I mean with that is, let's say, Jensen did that with CUDA. Like when CUDA started in the mid 2000s, I think it was certainly not. This wasn't a technology that delivered, right from the bat. I mean, this took time, but you could see through iterations where this is going. You could see that the ability to program in parallel, to parallelize, compute will accelerate compute and therefore enable technologies that back then weren't even known and today are, incredibly important. Similar point with Tesla. By giving up all the sensors other than vision, you constrain yourself into the most scalable and the most cost-effective way to deliver AI in the real world, and that requires some iteration and it requires some time, and it takes time. Certainly, the Tesla AI is a few years later than expected, but it will eventually lead towards a better solution. And the solution, and this is the final thing I want to say, which comes across from the interview. The best way to understand what the company is doing, just listen to their CEO. People don't lie. People, as much as they try to pretend and say things and that they don't want others to hear, or not say things and all that, they always say the truth. So what Waymo is doing is, according to their own statements, is optimizing for safety. That's what they want to do, and that's wrong. Like, I mean, if you want to optimize for safety, then just don't drive around. What you want to optimize for is three vectors. There has to be a constraint. It has to be safety, cost, and user experience. You can't just optimize for one thing. You can't obviously optimize for cost either and user experience, but you can argue that user experience kind of encompasses at least the safety aspect. So you could reduce the three to two, user experience and cost. Because of course, if it's not safe, if it's not reliable, if it's not trustworthy, then people won't use it. But you can also argue maybe the safety aspect is not the user experience aspect, but it's the regulators aspect, which they have a certain stake in this matter for right or for wrong. And then of course, cost is a very important factor, because you can't, I mean, you can deliver something at a very high cost that is very safe and has a great experience, something that the Chinese automakers are doing. You can lose money hands over fist and then somehow hope that the government bails you out. That's one approach. But the right approach, of course, Silicon Valley approach, the real Silicon Valley approach would be sort of the pre-Y Combinator, Sam Altman bullshit type approach, is to deliver value. That's the Steve Jobs type approach. What I mean with Y Combinator is that, unfortunately, Y Combinator has created this culture of throw shit at the wall and then hopefully something sticks, and in the meantime generate sales and flip your company to as many stupid investors you can find, cash out, and then maybe you get lucky, maybe not, sort of thing. That's of course not. It's creating some value, but it's not sustainable. So the real sustainable way of building value is to focus on these three vectors, which is safety, user experience, and cost. Optimize for them. And for that, you have to be able to sometimes transcend technical debt. You have to go with the best technology available at the moment to deliver your product. You obviously have to make very difficult decisions in terms of pivoting. That's what great CEOs and great management teams can do. That's why technology pays so well. If you can navigate the space, that's when you may generate the wealth. And if you do what Waymo's doing, then you will have a science project which will grow into something more than a science project, but that's really what it's going to be, a science project. It will never really end up becoming a scalable product. And in order to do that, I think this is not something you learn in the engineering school. This is a human thing. This is a human thing about iteration, about pivoting, about error correction, about honesty. And I think those are the kinds of things that make up great entrepreneurs. Thank you.